This is the best of First and Last, the podcast.
This morning is the ultimate example of what happens around here at First and Last. Like, take you guys behind the curtain, how we put the show together and all this. Allie, our producer, sends out an email usually sometime in the late afternoon, early evening, once we've had a lot of the day's events start to stack up, and we get an idea of the stuff that looks interesting that we might want to talk about. Gives me a chance to look at some of the articles on .com, see some of the sound that's come out so far, and kind of get a general idea of what we think is going to be interesting in the morning. And last night we knew we were going to have Cavs and the Warriors playing. We knew during the day we had a ton of NFL head coaching news that had come up. Still a lot of the fallout from the games this weekend in the divisional round of the NFL. Get to play some sound for my buddy Kyle Rudolph, who joined Golic and Wingo yesterday without telling me, and after I was gone on the show, which is a whole separate issue I'm going to take up with him. We get to make fun of his sound a little bit coming up here. And then you go to bed at some point. You watch the end of Cavs Warriors and The Bachelor. What is that? Is that still, are we cool with that still? I forgot about that. There was a while used to be pushback. I wasn't always allowed to talk about The Bachelor on here. People sometimes balked at that. I feel like we're in the clear now, though. We are going to bacon wrap for that for you guys in a little bit, but we got all that going on. And at some point, when you got to get up at 2:30 to do a show, you put your head down to your pillow, you go to sleep. You wake up the next morning, I'm driving in, listening to SportsCenter all night, and I'm thinking, all right, I got all this. I look down at my phone, I check Twitter, and NBA Twitter had themselves a night because boy, oh boy, did the Rockets and the Clippers have themselves a night. No one told them that they were the nightcap. No one told them that they were the follow-up act to Cavs Warriors ending that series. No. These guys decided to take it all on themselves and create a whole lot of interesting. Now, as far as the game goes, the Clippers get a win against the Rockets. That's all fine and good, but this is really about the Chris Paul homecoming last night, where the reaction in and of itself to that would have been interesting enough. The Clippers Twitter account sends out one very matter-of-fact tweet, thank you, Chris Paul, and that was it. There was a video tribute at the beginning that got, let's say, mixed reviews. And then even after the fact, this one hit the hardest for me of just what the viewpoint between these two teams are. Listen to the way Doc Rivers describes addressing Chris Paul with his team after the game.
Obviously, this is a lot about Chris coming back. You guys trying to win your fifth straight game, get above 500. With all that going on, did that cause things to get tense towards the end? And kind of push you guys towards this?
Listen, I guess we didn't mention Chris today. We talked about the Rockets, honestly. Like I said before, Chris was great for us, but Chris decided to leave us, and so he's no longer a Clipper, and we don't talk about him. We talk about Blake and DJ and all the guys on our team.
So right there, we see the subtle shade that's going to be the hallmark of this night. Now, after the fact, it was subtle. After the fact, Chris Paul talking about how the Clippers need to work through their go-to guy in Lou Williams was subtle. What occurred at the end of the game was not. So the situation got chippy towards the end of the game. Near the fourth quarter, there was a foul called on Chris Paul that Mike D'Antoni disputed. He started yelling at Blake Griffin. Him and Blake Griffin are both assessed technicals. Later in the quarter, another dust up. Blake Griffin assessed another technical, ejected, leaves the court, takes off, the standard NBA move, take off the jersey, walk out of there, high fives for everyone. But it was the covert operation by the Houston Rockets heading towards the Clippers locker room after that has garnered the lion's share of attention. So you've got all this, let's call it tension after the game, a little bit of jawing, that apparently led to James Harden, Chris Paul, Trevor Ariza, and Gerald Green pushing their way into the Clippers locker room Monday night, looking to confront Austin Rivers and Blake Griffin, of all people. Austin Rivers, who is sidelined in street clothes right now after, I believe, having ankle surgery or at least an ankle injury. No one with less impact on the court has been able to apparently incite rage in their opponents quite like Austin Rivers over a long body of time now. And what makes it even better is as these four were using an entrance that connects the two dressing rooms for the locker rooms, they had apparently sent Clint Capella to the front door of the locker room to Trojan horse this thing and offer the ultimate distraction. Clint Capella, who knocked on the front door of the Clippers locker room, only to have the door open and then closed in his face. And I imagine the sinking feeling of dread that has inspired memes and GIFs across the internet as the Clippers quickly realize, my God, Chris Paul, he knows about the secret entrance. He knows about the back door. And he led that internal assault that obviously amounted to nothing, but that our own Adrian Wojnarowski points out the NBA is going to have to look into nonetheless. Here he was last night talking about exactly what went down in the locker room.
After the game, 4 Rockets players, James Harden, Chris Paul, Gerald Green, and Trevor Ariza, literally breached the Clippers locker room, went through a back hallway that connects the Rockets locker room with the Clippers, got into the room. They were calling for Austin Rivers, Blake Griffin. Security got to them before there was any contact. The Clipper players saw them come in, I was told. They jumped up to their feet, but there was no physical confrontation. And while that was going on, Rockets center Clint Capella was knocking on the front door of the locker room. He was not let in. They're going to clearly start an investigation right away on it, talk to team officials, talk to the players. I would imagine that there will be some severe discipline here. It is rare, if ever, you hear about a team literally getting into another team's locker room, but that happened tonight. You saw what spilled over from during the game with Blake Griffin. Austin Rivers was injured, wasn't playing, but his verbiage from the bench incited some of those Rockets players, and they made a beeline right for that Clipper locker room after the horn.
First and last, Michael Oak Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So this Houston Rockets team was so incensed by the bleep talkery of Austin Rivers and the antics of Blake Griffin that they decided to, in Adrian Wojnarowski's words, breach the Clippers locker room. One that Chris Paul knows very well, albeit, but a breach of the Clippers locker room. This is why people love the NBA. Because during a regular season where you can hit plenty of doldrums, something like this will pop up every once in a while and remind you that these guys are more than willing to be complicit in the soap opera that is sports. And we get to a certain point where I don't know, for me, you wake up and you understand that nothing's actually going to come of this. You understand that while we're watching this unfold, as everyone sits there on their phones waiting with bated breath to see if there's actually anything, we know 9 out of 10 times nothing is actually going to happen, and everyone stands up and squares up in the locker room, and you know it's not actually going to come to blows. But a lot like Kyle Lowry and Ben Simmons early in the day that we already seem to forget about after that, everyone can run and talk about doing something, but very few are actually going to be about it enough to go through with it. We still wonder, maybe this is going to be the one time. Maybe this is going to be that lone exception. Where at the very least, the buildup already is suggested that they are willing to go over there and breach the Clippers locker room. So clearly, there is enough indication that they're willing to do something. Maybe they're willing to do enough to really take this thing over the line. But one thing that became very clear in all this is that breakup between Chris Paul and the Clippers was a clear line drawn in the sand. There's no looking back. There's no thinking about it. There's no being home on fall break and texting your ex to see if they're up and going out with everyone else the night before Thanksgiving. Maybe rekindle the old flame. No. Both very clearly. You heard Doc Rivers caping for his new bae before. Heard Chris Paul after caping for his new bae and Coach D'Antoni.
Coach told me he elbowed him, you know what I mean? So then I seen him talking crazy to Coach, so I'm always going to have Coach back.
What did you say to him?
I don't know. You probably got it. Ain't no telling. All the cameras in there now, you know what I mean? You probably can tell me what I said better than I did. Whatever it was, I'm sure my mama going to tell me to watch my mouth.
That much we can surely bank on. And that the commissioner is probably going to have to address this. because you can't exactly have breaches going on after the game. But this sets up for, and fortunately for us, mark it on your calendars, February 28th, the Houston Rockets at the Clippers, right here on ESPN. Gotta love it. We'll see if we can ring the bell again, because again, lines very clearly drawn here, and the only thing we can hope and pray truly now is that the Clippers find some way to sneak into the playoffs. Because if they can nestle in somewhere right around that 7 seed, we may get, I won't say 7 games of this, maybe 5 or 6. And that's more than enough for another breach.
First and last, the podcast.
The human catalyst thriving right now on Twitter. Gotta love that Capella was used as the Stugotz of the day. Clint Capella, as part of the Houston Rockets brigade, sent to breach the Clippers locker room after the Clippers win against the Rockets last night. Chris Paul's homecoming that ended in a little bit of an altercation because of some tension in the game. Tweet went on to say Austin Rivers, who was apparently jawing from the sideline, he was injured, and the Rockets players took exception to this. Said, Austin Rivers doesn't come off to me as a hashtag Stay Ready All-Star member. No one runs up on James Johnson on the Heat. Which is a very big reminder that you don't have to get ready if you stay ready, and I don't think Austin Rivers, for as much jawing as he does, is a guy that I would count on to stay ready if the situation were to, let's say, devolve into something a little more serious than what we got the other night. Now, thankfully, it didn't get to that point, because we all have to say this. You don't want to see it go there. We do. We all do. Little bit. Right? Like, there's just that little part of you that's like, maybe someone just swings. Maybe it happens. Maybe we see what comes from it. But we have to get up here and obviously say that we don't support violence and that we would never like to see that. It needs to stay on the court and et cetera, competition and sportsmanship and all that stuff. Someone swing. Let's just see what happens. But again, it's a reminder. If you're going to go over there, you better be ready. And the easiest way to be ready is to stay ready. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Last night, the game that we thought was going to be the story actually stayed on the court for the most part. The Cavaliers and the Warriors squared off last night in a game that was a tale of two halves. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, coming out in the first half, red hot, shot 57% from the field, +2 in the rebounding margin. LeBron James looked great in the first half, a ton of points in the paint. I think 38 points in the paint in the first half alone. And the Cavaliers really executing the way that they want to. You saw that 3-1 pick and roll with IT and LeBron working really well. A couple of nice lobs that are probably a preview of more of what we're going to get to see out of these guys as things go forward. But for right now, the end result was still the same. The Warriors made adjustments in the second half, outscored the Cavs 61-44 in that time, and ultimately walk away with the season sweep. The Warriors now 10-2 since Christmas Day, the game they played against the Cavs. The Cavs 2-8 in that same time period. And LeBron James, after the game, talked about how much these regular season games versus Golden State actually mean.
You want to play well versus them every time. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's the last 3 finals appearances, and you want to play well. You want to see where you are because, for the most part, they've been playing well for a long time now. So, you want to try to get better and better and see things that you can work on going forward, things that you need to get better at, things you can continue to get better at. So, it was a good game for us, for 36 minutes maybe 40 minutes. We had some opportunities, but we weren't able to cash in.
First and last, I'm Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app, and we heard stuff before the game about Isaiah Thomas, who is still coming back from the hip injury, saying he really doesn't have his legs underneath him. We know about the minutes restriction that he started his NBA season with. But it's all leading to a point now where, again, I feel like we're falling into the trap here. You come in this morning and you look at the sound sheet, and it seems like we're falling into the trap now. These are basketball minds that I certainly trust. Tim Legler, our NBA analyst, a great pro in the NBA and a guy who is seeing what he's seeing now out of them and doesn't believe this Cavaliers team at this point will represent the East in the finals.
Playoffs start tomorrow. I'm betting on Boston. I'm laying everything I have on Boston. Obviously, I think Golden State. I think Boston right now, the one team, could maybe come out of the East and challenge Golden State, but they'd be favored.
But what's the caveat for Cleveland that could change your mind is if who becomes something?
Isaiah Thomas has to become great to the point where they're so good offensively, they mask some of this defensive stuff, and he is clearly not there yet. He's trying to find himself again. If he becomes that second consistent attacker, 25-point type guy alongside LeBron, they should get out of the Eastern Conference, although Boston is elite defensively. But that's your matchup, and I'd bet on Cleveland maybe then. They're a long way from that right now because he's not right, and they're really bad defensively.
I mean, I think we know where they are away from them. It's called February. I would love to go back and look and see what the Cavaliers' record with LeBron James is in the month of January, because we seem to do this every year. And we talked about this the other day, and we still seem to be falling into this trap. I'm sorry, but I am not going to be here predicting the demise early. They're going to figure this out. We're going to freak out right now. We're all going to look dumb when they end up in the finals again. I don't understand how we keep letting this happen. And this is not a knock on Legs, who is looking at this from a basketball analyst standpoint. He's trusting what his eyes see. And that's the smart way to do things. But there are just certain teams that I think sort of transcend struggle at certain times like that. Like, hell, we just watched this with the Patriots. We would love to have believed that all of the things going on behind the scenes with that team would be enough to derail them. And then they go out and put together a complete performance, albeit against a bad team in the Tennessee Titans that snuck into the playoffs and won a game. But you take care of business. You play the team that's on the field, and you show no sign of distracting. Both of your assistant coaches that we'll get to in a little bit, your coordinators, are probably going to leave in the offseason, and it's still not going to matter. And the Cavaliers have earned their way into that. 7 straight finals appearances with LeBron James have earned their way into that conversation. So I'm sorry, but I'm not here for it. I can't buy into it. You can lose to the Warriors in the regular season all you want. You'll probably lose to them in the finals too. But I know you're going to get there and have the chance.
First and Last, the podcast. First and Last, the podcast.
The tweets just keep on rolling in. Stuff leaking out from this Clippers and Rockets situation. Let's call it a situation, because nothing actually really happened to the point where Adrian Wojnarowski, Woj on Twitter, tweeted out an article recapping the Houston Rockets push into the Clippers locker room, the breach, as he dubbed it, after the game, where he tweeted and said, one witness said, classic NBA, none of these guys were going to fight. Hot take right here. The NBA needs to worry about being labeled soft. There needs someone to swing at some point. We're a long way removed from Malice in the Palace, and I think we need to reestablish dominance. Someone's got to swing soon so they know, all right, these guys at least might be serious. May not be now, but it could be on the horizon. You don't want people thinking you're not willing to swing. Not for nothing, because someone tweeted me on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed and asked which 4 offensive linemen I would like to breach a locker room with. If you've got your 4-man roster, sports specific, so NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, etc. If you're gonna breach a locker room with one crew from your sport, who's your 4-man team? At ESPN Radio, at M. Golic Jr. 57. Also, not for nothing, note courtesy of Paul Hembekides via Dan Stanzik, our producer over at Golic and Wingo, who we take you up to every Monday through Friday. Mentioned the Cavaliers and their January struggles and how we traditionally overreact to them. In the last 2 seasons, the Cavs are 9-12 in January, 68-35 in every other month. So this is what they do. We understand that. Just take the month of January and rope it off. It is the VIP of the Cavs season where they decide that they just don't give a bleep, and they proceed accordingly. Speaking of giving a bleep and proceeding accordingly, the Minnesota Vikings gave very many at the end of their game against the Saints the other night. Kyle Rudolph, the Minnesota Vikings tight end, joined Golic and Wingo, Dad and Trey, yesterday. My old roommate from Notre Dame, the current Vikings Pro Bowl tight end, to explain what exactly went down at the end of the game and even went so far as to tell us a very interesting play call name that helped decide the fate of the Minnesota Vikings and allowed them to keep going forward. Here was Kyle yesterday on Golic and Wingo.
I get it. Notre Dame, Golic Jr., whatever. Let's talk about the most important thing here. Take us through what went on in your mind. First of all, what was the play call in the huddle, Kyle?
Believe it or not, heaven. So at that point in the game, you just got to give it up to heaven, and it worked out.
Oh, that's amazing.
Really?
The play call is heaven?
Just got to give it up. Well, and we go from the huddle, and Case told all of us, I'm going to give somebody a chance here. I'm not sure which guy it's going to be, but somebody's going to get a chance to make a play. Just go out there and make it, and kind of flooded the sideline, hoping to get the ball out of bounds and have a chance to kick a field goal. And I was the first one to the flat, and after I got to the flat and turned and saw Case throw the ball, I was basically directly down the sideline watching Diggs go up, make the catch, and my initial reaction was that he's going to get tackled and be inbounds. And then I saw him stay on his feet and immediately thought to get out of bounds. And then as he just took off running, I was like, oh, my God, he just scored. And so I just ran down the sideline with him.
I get, and again, the route, you ran the short route, Jarius Wright ran the middle route, and it was Steph who ran the longer route. So I'd imagine you had to think because of the distance you needed, the ball probably wasn't going to come to you.
Correct.
I don't know if you probably thought so. So again, as you just mentioned, you had the best view of the whole thing. That to me, Kyle, was the most amazing thing of it. I mean, listen, Marcus Williams is going to feel sick for missing that tackle, but for Diggs to have the wherewithal to realize there was nobody there, because I would have thought he would immediately got out of bounds. Was part of you saying, get out of bounds? What are you doing?
Yeah, immediately. Once he caught it and stayed on his feet, that was the first thing that kind of flashed in my mind. And then once he kept his balance and was able to take off running, then at that point it was go score. But at first, once he left his feet, went up, and made the catch, I was just like, please get out of bounds. Find a way to get out of bounds. And he stayed on his feet. Unbelievable body control and balance. Just a great all-around play by Diggsy.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Yep.
Kyle Rudolph, the Vikings tight end with us. Okay, so this is the next question I have for you. First of all, shattering the time-space continuum that the play call was heaven.
That's fantastic.
It's probably called
really
the exact
is.
opposite of that in New Orleans right now. but that's a separate issue for another day. So we see everybody running down, and Case is holding his head. He's trying to find someone to hug. Who was the first guy you grabbed and just said, I can't believe this happened?
I ran and never going to catch Stephon, but I ran towards the end zone to try to catch up to him, and he just kind of continued running, took his helmet off, ran a little bit into the tunnel. There was kind of a big scrum of guys there, and then I turned, and I just saw Case with no helmet running down the field, like you said, just looking for somebody to hug. So, we jumped in the air, and then at that point it was just anyone and everyone that you saw, you just ran around and gave them a hug.
Absolutely incredible. We're talking to Kyle Rudolph, tight end for the Vikings, had 5 catches in the game and was on the field for that last play, which was called heaven, which is really amazing. But we definitely want to have you another time for a longer time. But I'd like to know, at 9:58 of the second quarter, you're up 17-0. At 3:01 of the fourth quarter, you're losing 21-20. What are the two emotions there when that happened?
Well, for us on offense, we felt like, we just needed to make one more drive there in the second half. And unfortunately, we were doing things that, we knew going into it that we couldn't do. We couldn't give up sacks and we couldn't turn the ball over. And those are things that we did in the second half that allowed them to get back in the game. And anytime you give a first ballot Hall of Famer life and give him a second chance, he's going to take advantage of it. So for us on offense, we just kept preaching, like, it's going to be one drive. We just need one drive, one play at a time, and, we'll put this thing out of reach. I did not think that one play would come on the last play of the game, but it did.
Well, and that leads – everyone says you always have belief toward the end. Where was your belief-o-meter? Seriously, with 10 seconds left, knowing the situation. I know there was a part of you that said we can still do this, but honestly, where were you on a scale of 1 to 10?
So I knew there would be a good chance for us to get a chunk play there at the end and possibly attempt the field goal. And as the play was developing, their corner jumped me in the flat. And like Mr. Golic said earlier, there was no chance I was getting the ball. Like, I'm 5-6 yards in the flat. You know, we still wouldn't have been in field goal range. We needed a big chunk. So when he jumped me, I knew that Jarius Wright and Stephon would be 2-on-2 with the next two guys on the sidelines. And, you know, I just kept thinking, all right, here, one of these guys have to make a play and get that chunk. And then, you know, he threw it up to Stephon, and the rest is history.
It's incredible. Incredible. Kai, look to have you on for a longer time. We appreciate you jumping on for a few minutes. And early weather, 53 and partly cloudy in Philly, so good shape for you guys, man.
Thanks Kyle. Appreciate it. And
Thanks,
never call him Mr. Golic again. Let's just be clear about that. Let's just stop that now.
First and last of Michael Oak Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. It's a unique conundrum at the end there. Because like I said, Kyle was a roommate and a teammate of mine in college, but you meet guys that you're going to college when you're 16, 17 years old. That recruiting process starts pretty early in high school. So we've known Kyle about that long. What is the time? Because that seems like a relative thing to me. Because it's difficult to, over time, graduate out of calling someone Mr. or Mrs. that you've known for a long time. Like, what's the statute of limitations on that? Do you ever really feel comfortable growing out of someone who you've called that since you were a kid? Because I've had adults that have been in my life since I was a kid tell me now as an adult, you know, you call me by my first name. And I'm still not comfortable with it. I tag the Mr. and Mrs. on there all the time, so they can make fun of Kyle all they want. I get it. Kyle's a man with 2 kids now, wife and family. But at some point, it's all still relative. And at some point, you're still the guy that was coming over and changing our air filter at the condo during college. You're Mr. Golic. So, don't want to false. Dad and Trey, I think it helps Dad and Trey. They're at that point where I think getting called that repeatedly might make them feel a little old. It's okay, guys. You don't have to lash out. It's fine. You're not old. You're experienced. You guys can get all that experience over at Golic and Wingo from 6 to 10 Eastern. And maybe a little shot of youth from 6 to 7. We'll see how it goes.
First and last, the podcast.
We asked you which foursome you would breach a locker room with in honor of the Houston Rockets, led by Chris Paul and really aided by the efforts. Like, you know what I think the other underrated part of this is who your Clint Capella would be. Like, we had the 4 Rockets players that were part of a locker room breach with Chris Paul, but the unsung hero is Clint Capella, who was sent to sort of Trojan horse this thing at the front door of the locker room while those guys snuck in the back. Who's the Clint Capella? Because we have some compelling answers. 4-man roster from at CL Miller 8 on Twitter. My 4-man roster: Aqib Talib and Ndamukong Suh, Andre Johnson, and Gronk. I feel like Gronk's the one you send to the front door. I really do, because poor, sweet, innocent Gronk, like, he doesn't need to be around for any of this. Just have him go knock on the front door. You know, he'll distract them by telling some sort of, like, I don't know, 69 joke or chugging a beer. They'll be confused. And then because the rest of that roster, Aqib Talib is probably the first ballot Hall of Famer on this team. Like, that is a guy, in the midst of all the chain snatching drama that we saw, we learned, whether it was on his highly questionable interview, Aqib Talib is very much a guy you don't want to push. And there's always, I've said, that line that you have to know with guys that you are getting ready to get into it with, of who is really, really willing to go that extra mile and who's going to keep this thing on the field. Because there are some guys that are more than willing to go and fight you in the tunnel, a la Kyle Lowry. And there are guys that really don't want to see that. Like, that's not a knock on Ben Simmons, but some people just really don't want to see that. Andre Johnson wearing out. Who was that he, I'm drawing a blank on the name right now, but Andre Johnson wearing out what's his name from the Titans in that moment was one of the most iconic on-field butt whoopings I have ever seen. And cements his place on this team, without question. And Ndamukong Suh, guy who, between the lines, is more than enough for this. Matt Bowler tweets in, NFL past and present, I'd go Olin Kreutz, Ndamukong Suh, Julius Peppers, and Dick Butkus. Cortland Finnegan. That was who Andre Johnson wore out. Good Lord. That one still hurts. Olin Kreutz is a super underrated part of this list, by the way. Guy with a mean streak a mile wide. If I had to put together 4 offensive linemen, though, you go Donald Penn from the Oakland Raiders, who, again, I still don't understand why people were so content to try him this season. Both the Pounceys, and probably Quentin Nelson, the guard coming out of Notre Dame, who I'm going to let you guys know is very ready. First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Interesting reaction yesterday. So I saw people all up in arms because this was on ESPN.com. Danica Patrick confirms that she's dating Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Confirmed it to the AP yesterday. And people lose their mind that this is on ESPN.com. Like, man, we got a lot of space on there. We got a lot of content we need to push. And you're going to get mad because we told you that famous race car driver started dating famous NFL quarterback? Like, man, you got to figure out your priorities because there's a lot of other stuff you can be getting mad about that ain't that bad. Because this, to me, is, like, relatively interesting. It brings up, I think, an interesting debate, one we were having here on This Morning. Like, who is more famous, overall famous out of these two? We had our ESPN Fame 100, where Aaron Rodgers, I believe, checks in 10 spots ahead of Danica. Danica is someone who, listen, right now is getting ready to end her racing career and focus more on her brand outside of racing because she has evolved to that point. Now, I would put my vote firmly in the camp for Aaron Rodgers on this one, just because he was dating a movie star for a while. Like, him and Olivia Munn dated for 3 years. He was a guy that was seen in a lot more circles outside of just football because of that. He's a guy that, in general, very marketable. It's as soon as we brought up Aaron Rodgers this morning, and this is great for the State Farm people because this is how easily and recognizable it was. But as soon as Aaron Rodgers got brought up, I just started humming, "Believe it or not, I'm walking on air." Like, instinctively, I couldn't even control myself. That's how airtight it is. The discount double check, all that stuff. He seems to transcend it. Worth noting, Danica Patrick, known Chicago Bears fan, says she will now probably have to start cheering for the whole Packers team, and then removed the probably and said she will now start cheering for that team. So, shows you again how subjective fandom is. It's really sad. It's like that family from the NFL commercial that slowly just started going and siphoning off their fandom to whoever was closest around. It's fleeting, but you want the players to stay loyal to the team. I've got the Smith family, who's a Bears, Jets, Bengals, Vikings, Packers family, but you want the team to stay there. This is what I'm talking about. Now, see, this news is probably a little bit easier to sell to me and the crew around First and Last here because we were the ones splitting time watching The Bachelor and Cavs Warriors last night. Like, we missed all the fireworks later, but that's because we were watching the fireworks early on. Worth noting, though, sports tangent, Ari, the current Bachelor, is a self-described race car driver. I don't know how legit that is with him. I don't know what the barrier to entry of saying you're a race car driver is, but he got to do that. He gets to put that. I feel like they play fast and loose with these titles on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. But he is dubbed as the race car driver. There was wrestling on the episode last night. They took a spinoff from, I don't know if anyone's seen the Netflix series Glow, the Glamorous Ladies of Wrestling. This was Glob, the Glamorous Ladies of The Bachelor, and last night. So there were a lot of sports tie-ins last night that ultimately still got us to a place where all I could really notice was the fact that Ari, the current Bachelor, I'd be interested to see, by the way, Allie, where are girls on the hair brush over the ear move? Because this guy could clearly not be in the physical presence of a woman without doing that move every time, and it bothered the hell out of me.
I don't know. It's weird. It is very weird. I like it when I'm, like, sick, and it's more of like a feel better. It's very weird that he does it all the time. It's almost like he's petting them.
Over and over again. He has a very consistent set of moves that he pulled out here. And that one was at the top of the list. So didn't really understand that one. Didn't really understand it. Shout out to in this case, poor Annalise. So, no spoilers, but being told that you're the one girl out of the 26 in the house or however many are left that you don't feel like you're there yet at the point of the relationship where you can exchange a kiss after I've watched this guy kiss 20 some odd women in this house. the laughter she emitted after that moment was just the sound of her soul leaving her body. That was Mortal Kombat level fatality stuff from Ari last night. And that was your Bachelor recap, with plenty of sports tie-ins along the way. Get you the show that can do both.
First and last, the podcast. First and last, the podcast.
We've been asking you guys all morning in honor of the situation that we've dubbed between the Houston Rockets and the Clippers last night, after the Clippers got a win over the Rockets during the Chris Paul homecoming. We had the video tribute. The Clippers sent a very succinct tweet thanking Chris Paul for his services. And then the game went on. We had a dust up at the end involving Blake Griffin. Austin Rivers was chirping. And it all led to 4 players, led by Chris Paul from the Houston Rockets, breaching the Clippers locker room, and an altercation that ultimately turned out to be a whole lot of nothing, leading us to try and put together the best possible 4-man team to breach a locker room with. You guys have come up with some solid answers. Josiah Brazier 23 tweets in, my breach team in the NFL would be James Harrison, Steve Smith Sr., Aaron Donald, and Brian Dawkins. Strong to quite strong. I feel like any NFL team not led by Debo is probably missing out. That seems like the guy first off the bus you want going through the door. But don't lose Steve Smith. That guy, all-star. Doesn't matter if you're on his team, on the other team. Anyone can get it when it comes to Steve Smith. Definitely someone you want on your side. At DWelch417 tweets in, I would take Ron Artest, Steven Jackson, Ben Wallace, and Rasheed Wallace. Ron Artest and Steven Jackson, some of the original Stay Ready All-Stars. And, of course, the Wallace brothers from the early 2000s Pistons. Hard to beat that group right there. Big Ben Wallace, an icon in the game. So you guys can keep those coming at ESPN Radio, at M. Golic Jr. 57. And I think it's been interesting coming off of this weekend in the NFL. So obviously last night the NBA did what the NBA does and lit Twitter up. But the NFL coming off this weekend was a monster story in its own right. We spent most of yesterday still basking in the afterglow of what we saw in the playoffs, and really what we saw out of teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars, who got past the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team with an unbelievable offense and a veteran quarterback, after hearing all week about what hot trash their quarterback, Blake Bortles, was. And it became even more interesting to see the way that his teammates came out and consistently defended him. These guys were making it abundantly clear that they believe that Blake Bortles is more than good enough to get the job for them. Tommy Bohannon, the Jacksonville Jaguars fullback, went on Freddie and Fitzsimmons and talked about how they don't really care what the outside world has to say.
He's been the leader of our offense this entire year, and I mean, especially these last few weeks and everything, he's been playing like one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and to see what he's been doing, I mean, we have no inkling or anything that he's gonna falter. We have great confidence in him, and for everybody on the outside, we don't really care what they're saying. We're worried about us, and we're very confident in him.
First and last of Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And that becomes interesting because there have been enough spots this year where the Jags have faltered, where Blake Bortles has thrown for under 100 yards and they've still managed to win, in spots where a lot of people would look from the outside in and say, man, the defense really must feel like they have to carry this guy. Or Leonard Fournette, a rookie, seems to have so much dumped on his plate in an effort to make sure that Blake Bortles doesn't have to win them games. And yet this team, to a man, after the game, we played you the sound the other day where they are extremely vocal in defense of their quarterback. And you start to look around in the Final Four for this playoff group, and you see a lot of quarterbacks that are sort of at this replacement level that are getting it done and are having support from their teams. Kyle Rudolph, whose interview we played before, talked to him for the weekend show. I'm on Weekend Observations with Stu Gatz on Sunday mornings. And he said they have a ton of confidence in Case because they understand, and Case understands, he doesn't have to go out there and play with some Herculean effort to win them games. And that seems to be a trend this postseason. So much so that folks over at For the Win at USA Today, Steve Ruiz, wrote an article about how it's officially a time to retire the notion that the NFL is a quarterback league. As we look at a playoff with Nick Foles in Philadelphia, Blake Bortles and Case Keenum, all with the chance to make the Super Bowl. And they goes on to point out in the article that in the time basically since Joe Flacco notched his huge contract and now Derek Carr and Matt Stafford have made themselves the highest paid guys in the league, that no quarterback with a cap hit north of $20 million has ever won a Super Bowl. That being, 6 years removed from Drew Brees being the first guy to do that at $20 million, and basically arguing that your roster and your team can be better served if you're allocating funds elsewhere. The one point I agree with in this article is that this should maybe be a signal to teams like maybe the Cincinnati Bengals, where you look at and see Andy Dalton. Maybe that's the line of demarcation where you say, in any other world, would we have overpaid for this guy in the past? Absolutely. But we've seen enough evidence now where we don't believe that he's a guy that's willing to and able to carry this enough. The problem is that most of these contracts are really banking on the future where there will be a comparative value. Like Aaron Rodgers, even now we understand is a guy that maybe is exempt from a conversation like this just because of how otherworldly he is. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was the example of the guy who was worth more than his weight in gold because of last year's run, where over the course of the final 8 games in the postseason, he left enough teams with good quarterbacks and great teams in his wake basically on his own to say that that guy is worth it. But there are plenty who aren't. But the problem is that you pay up front for the ability to have this position stabilized down the road when the rest of the market jumps. We talked about the other day, the cap has jumped significantly for the NFL year to year in the past 5 or 6 years, and really since the last CBA was signed. And it's allowed teams with this rollover spending to be able to go out and really use a lot of that cap space and buy up a lot of contracts. The Jacksonville Jaguars are a team that benefited in free agency because of these monster cap jumps. And when you stabilize the position of quarterback with a guy you believe is good enough with a contract that may hurt a bit in the beginning, you understand they're going to get reworked 3 or 4 years into the contracts, and that you're going to be operating comparatively out of the bargain bin by the time that you get there. Because while I agree, depending on the way your team is structured, it's not necessary, and teams like the Eagles, the Vikings, and the Jaguars that are so predicated on their great defenses and their ability to stop, competent ground games, and overall skill positions on the other in the other spots, you still look at what it takes you to get there. And this isn't some earth-shattering news that football is about maximizing your value when it's kept low, especially under this CBA. The reason the Eagles are in the position they're in now is because Carson Wentz is a rookie. Jacksonville has Blake Bortles on his rookie contract still. All of these different things. We know in this CBA, especially now that they have gifted you these contracts with much lower guarantees, that it behooves you to strike while the iron's hot and you've got these guys in early windows. But I don't think you're going to stop needing great quarterbacks. Like, we can't use Tom Brady as an example of this just because he is in a unique situation, been willing to take less because his family life affords him that. Like, you can't expect that from everyone else. You've just got to hit on draft picks. That's all the Saints did. I mean, Drew Brees has still been the same cap, and we thought they were going to be a Super Bowl bound team, and they were very close to doing that because they finally hit on some draft picks at other positions. So it's basically what you believe is easier to find in the draft. And I think most people assume that because of the wealth of talent, because of the amount of guys at the position, there's only one quarterback on the field at once. And it's a lot more difficult to find one even competent quarterback. Like, we act like finding guys like Case Keenum and Nick Foles is even all that easy at the quarterback spot. That even finding guys that can go out there and be serviceable given that is easy. I mean, we've seen enough of what's happened in Houston with the Texans over the last, and I understand Case was a part of that at one point in time, but we've seen that it's not easy to just rotate quarterbacks in there and still have top-end success that can get you any place worth going. So it's always going to be about what you think is easier to hit on in the draft, because that's really what teams like the Patriots, who have had consistent success, what the Seahawks, when they had success. Yeah, you found a diamond in the rough in Russell in the third round and got him, but you also hit on a bunch of undrafted free agents and late round picks on the defensive side of the ball that now got their comeuppance and got paid. I mean, Seattle's downfall is just as much about the number of guys they've had to pay on defense to keep that unit together as they have had having to pay Russell on offense finally. So I don't think it's just as simple as assigning the blame to quarterbacks and saying we're in a post-quarterback league. Now, you still seem to need one to give you a chance. These guys performing above expectation is the reason they have a chance, and I still think paying them in the right situation can be a strong move and can be a value-making move for teams going forward. That's not to say that's all created equal, and we're going to have that tested with Kirk Cousins this offseason as he hits the open market of just what people are willing to do for a guy that's probably right on that bubble level, and find out accordingly.
Thank you for listening to the First and Last podcast. You can listen and subscribe to all ESPN podcasts in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. First and Last.